Hey there, my name is Mark, and this is my 1980 Ford Fairmont station wagon. This station wagon originally had a V6 and an automatic in it, and I have since converted it to a 302 out of a 95 Cobra and a T5Z out of that same 95 Cobra. She's been a little bit of daily driver status. I take her from Arizona to California for the Fabulous Forge car show. We've done the Route 66 fun run in it. We took it down to the duct tape drags, and she's been a good little car. My biggest complaint is the factory cluster. Factory cluster went out on it some time ago. I couldn't find another one, so I converted it to the 1986 cluster. I have been through 3 different clusters since then. 25, 30-year-old clusters. They're not going to last forever. And unfortunately, every single time I get one, the speedometer quits working in it. None of them have ever had a working fuel gauge. So I've had to wire in my own fuel gauge because of that. So I'm tired of dealing with that. So let's move on to the positive. This is the Dakota Digital instrument cluster kit for the 1979 to 1986 Ford Mustang. I'm going to be installing this in the Ford Fairmont station wagon. So, pretty basic kit. Here's your communication wires for your cluster. It's just a serial cable. So it goes right to your VHX module. This wiring here goes straight to your speed sensor, which hooks into the transmission, which I have new gears for here. That's a pretty basic setup. There's a little plug that goes in there so that the sensor doesn't leak. I haven't even pulled the plastic off this thing yet. So there's the VHX module, and then this is the digital sensor packages. It's got all the sensors you need and the wiring for it. And of course the instructions that nobody's going to read anyways. All right, let's do this. First thing I've done is got the car up in the air, and I have removed the vehicle speed sensor. That is what's going to tell our speedometer what speed we are going. There's a few ways to set up the speedometer on this vehicle. I'm going to show you the 2 that are readily available to me at the moment. So here is the factory speed sensor, and here is the one that is supplied with the kit. I have opted to not use this sensor, and the reason being it has a few issues. The bolt hole doesn't really line up well. See if we can get a good spot on that. It's very close to the housing or the body, and the bolt wants to rub right here. The other issue I'm running into with this sensor is when I tried to put a gear on this sensor, it didn't want to line up and doesn't want to lock into place. Now I could fix that. I could probably trim a little bit off of the point here and allow the gear to slide on a little further, and then I'd probably be okay. But overall, it's an aftermarket sensor. It's a 3-wire sensor. I could get this to work with no problem, but I'm going to opt with using a factory style sensor assembly. The gear I already know was already on there, so it works. The only thing I have to do is install this plug. This plug is going to take place of where the cable goes to normally, and then we're going to plug our vehicle speed sensor harness into here. And now this is only a 2-wire setup, which is pretty easy to set up. If you look at the VHX module right here, your speed sender and your speed negative are the 2 that you're going to use for this setup. Now that's all outlined in our guides here. I want to say it's Here we go. So it's all in the guide. It shows you how to hook them up. And so in this instance, we're basically using like this one here, which is actually wired the same as this one here. So either way, those two will work. If you're going to use this sensor here, you would use this wiring diagram here, so which means you're going to use the positive, the speed sender, and the speed negative. And that's all, it's all color coded on there. So you could, you know, pretty easily just hook this thing up. You know what to do with it. And then it just plugs right in like so. And you'd be good to go. For my application, I've decided to just go ahead and use the 2-wire setup. Nothing wrong with using it. It'll work just fine. Okay, so let's move on to the oil pressure and coolant temperature sensors. In my case, my sensor was actually leaking, so I'm glad that we're going through this, because now I get to install the new Dakota digital oil pressure sensor. I've installed a little bit of PTFE on both sides of it, so sensor going to the adapter going into the timing cover. I pulled the old coolant sensor out from an old autometer setup I had. I'm reading 1.9 k ohms on that sensor. The new Dakota digital sensor is reading 0.8 k ohms. So we would have had a temperature variance from actual to what that sensor is telling it it's reading. So we would have an incorrect reading on that. These wire in pretty easily. As you can see here, this one is the oil pressure sensor. It's the 3-wire. It's color coded. We've got white, red, and black. Okay. And on the coolant temp sensor, those are 2-wire, just a red and a black. If we go over here to the VHX module, you'll see the oil sender has the red, white, and black, and then the water sensor has the red and black. So pretty easy install. We are going to be using in this setup the original factory speedometer cable hole to be routing all of these wiring through. So I'm going to be routing the coolant temp, oil pressure, and the speed sensor wiring through that same hole in a loom and through a grommet, so that, you know, it protects it from outside elements and any chafing of the harnesses. Okay, now let's talk about wiring. I'm going to try to show you guys how to set up the VHX and the Dakota digital without having a electrical schematic of your vehicle, because from 79 all the way up to 86, a lot of the wiring colors change. Not a lot of people have access to the proper and appropriate colors for the pin connectors. These are the connectors you're going to pull off the back of your cluster. I've already pre-removed them, and I've already depinned and set up all my wires, but I'm going to show you how to figure out what wire goes where. And to do so, you're going to need to get yourself a test light and a digital volt ohm meter. Now, the first circuit we're going to test, due to access reasons on the Ford Fairmont, I had to drop the tank to figure out what wire ran all the way up to the kick panel. And then since I never had a cluster that worked, I ended up wiring in my own gauge. I've now since removed all of that stuff, but I do still have the wire that I ran. And so the way you're going to do is you would pull the wires from the back. There's going to be 3 wires. It's going to have a ground, a source voltage, and then your signal wire. The signal wire is basically what reads the resistance off of the fuel level sensor. In my case, I believe I have a 180 ohm empty and either a 10 or 20 ohm full level sensor in the tank. I'm almost empty, and I'm currently reading 166 ohms. So what I've done is, I know that this is the wire because I've already gone back there. I know what color wire. I traced it all the way to the kick panel here. and I believe this was a green with a yellow stripe, and I just basically piggybacked off of that, and that's how you know. Now, the way you would do it if you're pulling your cluster apart is in these connectors here, you would see that same wire color. And in fact, the green with the yellow stripe, I believe that's the one right there anyways. So you would be able to, and to test that it's correct, you would hook up your ohm meter. I already have my meter grounded. You would run a terminal to here, make sure the key is off, and then you would test the circuit and make sure that you have 166 ohms. Okay? Or you're gonna have a range of, I think they in the book it tells you there's a couple different level sensor ranges. You might be able to look that schematic up, for your year, but you would have some sort of a, if the wire back in the back matches what you're seeing up front, and you have somewhere in the realm of, that 20 to 180 ohms like I do, then that's the right wire for your level sensor. Okay, so now that we've figured out which wire is our level sensor, since we already have the ohm meter hooked up, we're gonna test for ground on those two pigtails. But like I said, I've already got it separated. I've got all the labels made for what wires. This is for your guys' sake. I don't need to do this, but this is for your sake. The labels are huge, right? So I've already got them written out so that for filming purposes, we could read it easier. So luckily in our instance, the black wire is a ground, and I've already sourced it. It is right here. That's a ground. So if you want to confirm that that's ground, you would take your test lead, and you heard the meter probably ding, and you would hook up. And what you're going to look for is 0.1 to 0.2 ohms, and it's flashing back and forth probably because I got a bad connection with my fingers here, but 0.1 to 0.2 ohms, that's going to be your cluster ground. Okay, so now that we've figured out what our ground is, we have figured out this will be your ground down here. We have already figured out our fuel, so this will be our fuel sender. That'll be that one that we tested that was 166 ohms on this vehicle. It's going to vary for your vehicle. And then we're going to need to find the constant power, which we're going to have to supply on our own because this vehicle doesn't have one. And then we're going to need the accessory power for here and for here. So there's going to be two different wires you're going to need accessory power for these. Or not accessory, but you're going to need start and run power going to them. So I've got the key on already, and as you can see, we have voltage there on our switched on start and run. Same thing with that wire. That's going to be the one for the fuel level, for the fuel positive circuit. That's going to be start and run, 12.6 volts. Okay, so now we're going to look into your turn signals. So you're going to have a left and a right signal here. So it's easy enough just to basically turn the turn signal onto right. You can hear it clicking, and we're going to watch for the flash. Okay, so that'll be for the right, and then for the left. Watch for the flash. Simple as that. Now I've got an issue with my high beam circuit. The switch itself is acting up, so I don't want to make things worse. But you would do the same thing. You would actuate the high beam, and as you can see right now, we don't have anything going on to it right now. But if I was to actuate the high beam, that would flash. But I need to get a new switch in this one, so I just discovered that was having issues. We already figured out ground. Okay, so same thing with the dimmer switch. So that's the dimmer. So what we're going to do is, as you can see, I have, flip this around. I have nothing going to it. But as soon as I flip the headlights on, Now we have voltage going to it. Okay. So, and the dimmer circuit's going to be there. The high beam circuit would have been there. Your left turn signal goes there. Your right turn signal goes there. And then there's a bunch of others you can hook up if you have those options. I don't have the options in this vehicle. And then I've also pre-wired. I've already ran the wires for the speed sensor, for the tach ground. So what I did for the tach ground, this car didn't come with a tachometer originally. So this, you would basically, you can run a wire from the connector. There's a two terminal connector that goes to your coil. You can just run a wire from there into the car, or if your vehicle already came with a tach, there will be a tach ground already attached to those plugs, those little gray plugs. And the way you would do that, same thing with the ohm meter. Grab your ohm meter, you can probe the plug here and, you know, disconnect your plug out there. Make sure you don't have a key on. Disconnecting the battery would probably be even better for that. And that way you can tell if you have continuity coming from this plug straight to that plug, okay? So I've got this cluster fully wired and installed. We've hooked up that dimmer wire, and I'm filming at night because I wanted to show you guys how cool this cluster looks at night. Check this out. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Now it's time for me to go for a test drive. Let's go test out that cluster and fill up that fuel tank. Good luck with your installs. Feel free to reach out if you need help. Lucifer351@gmail.com. Have a good one.